Today is Wednesday, August 16th. Yesterday was August the 15th, and we had a holiday. It is called the Independence Day. We got our own independence from Japan in 1945. The Japan ruled Korea for 36 years, and it was terrible. They wreaked havoc on the Korean economy, Korean people. Many people were killed. They summarily executed a lot of independent independence fighters, and the freedom fighters. And they stole our rice, gold from Korea, and so on. But today, Japan is prosperous because they benefited hugely from the Korean War. North Korea and South Korea, they fought against each other to gain control over their peninsula. And Japan supplied all the military resources to the U.S. Army, and they got a huge leg up, and the economy skyrocketed to the sky. But all those are the past, and we need to look for the future. And I traveled to Japan 2 weeks ago, and I bought a suntory whiskey. And later on, I found out that Japanese whiskey is quite special. I don't mean that their quality is superior and they give you the most bang for a buck, but it's just that they use mizunara oak. In Korean, it's the suntory or 도토리나무, or in English, it's just plain, deciduous tree called oak. It's just that mizunara. It's what mizunara trees are just acorn trees. The Indians ate acorns to survive. So nothing special. In Europe, in America, they use different oak trees. In Japan, they use mizunara tree. Mizunara is just plain. They grow in Korea too, although they are not thick. So maybe that's why the mizunara oaks are quite expensive, because the trees on average, they are about 15 to 30 centimeters in diameter. So they are not hugely fat. They are just slim. So when you cut down a tree, you only get like one barrel out of one tree or two trees. So the oak production becomes more expensive. It uses a lot of oak trees, acorn oak trees. So that's why expensive. So let's delve into. I heard, in Japan they use sake or koji. That's east. So sake or koji fermented alcohol goes into the mizunara oak barrel, and they get fermented and gain flavors and so on for 18 years, 15 years, 25 years, 28 years. So and it becomes whiskey. Whiskey generally comes from barley or hop or what else? All the grains, right? Grains, barley, flour, and wheat, right? So let's find out how Japanese made it successfully to ferment their own whiskey out of sake and the mizunara oak trees. This article is from thekanta.com, and I just randomly pulled this off the internet. I am trying to read this English article as a part of my effort to practice English. I promise to myself to read English article each day, the length of which can be 20 minutes to 40 minutes in length, and so that's why here I am. Let's go for it. The wonders of Japanese mizunara oak. Mizunara Japanese oak aged whiskey. Yamazaki is the famous brand. As many of you may know, the period of World War II was an extremely difficult time for numerous countries, including Japan. It was fucking difficult for Koreans. Man, we Koreans, Chinese, Taiwanese, Vietnamese, Cambodians, they suffered hugely under the Japanese rule. One major issue during that time was that Japan had no access to imports. Therefore, Japanese whiskey producers were finding it increasingly difficult to secure barrels for maturation during that period. It makes sense. While Japanese mizunara oak-aged whiskey consumption rose greatly in Japan during the war, with whiskey becoming the main drink consumed by the Japanese army, acquiring essentials like medicine, food, oil, and other necessities for survival was prioritized over acquiring barrels to age whiskey in. Obviously, that's interesting, and I was surprised. I am surprised that Japanese army really consumed whiskey as a main drink. That's, I don't know. They are always addicted to sake. However, there was still a high demand for whiskey, and with no hope of importing European or American oak to the country, Japanese whiskey makers had to find an alternative. This alternative turned out to be Japanese oak, better known as mizunara. Flavors and use. Soon after the discovery of mizunara oak for whiskey, which was used up until then in the construction of expensive furniture, Japanese coopers and whiskey makers discovered several issues. What? Here, cooper is the person who repairs or makes oak barrels, right? So soon after the discovery of mizunara oak for whiskey, which was used up until then in the construction of expensive furniture, Japanese coopers, the makers of barrels, and whiskey makers discovered several issues. Firstly, Japanese oak has a much higher moisture content than other types of oak, making it much more difficult to work with. Secondly, it also doesn't grow straight. Thirdly, acorn trees, they don't grow straight. They just wobble, swing, swerve, a lot of curvy parts. And what are the parts where that becomes very thick? I forgot the word. And lastly, as the wood is more porous than other types of oak, Japanese oak casks are prone to leaking. As you can expect, the great Japanese whiskey makers weren't all too excited to work with their domestically grown oak. I forgot the word where the branch splits from the main trunk. And when you make a denture or injury to the or scratch or injury to the tree, it forms the protective round, and that is called in Korean ungi, and in English it is called I forgot the. It starts with a K, something like that. I forgot. And if these issues weren't, as you can expect, the great Japanese whiskey makers weren't all too excited to work with their domestically grown oak. And if these issues weren't enough to deal with, the oak also presented issues on the palate for whiskey drinkers. In the early stages of maturation, the flavor imparted from the oak were quite intense, with too much woodiness exploding onto the palate. It was quickly decided that Japanese oak was inferior to the European and American alternatives, and this belief lives on years after the Pacific War. However, while we don't know exactly when the real magic of the unloved Japanese oak shone through, it was discovered that the oak needed time to truly work into the whiskey and impart the right flavors and aromas. In fact, many claim that one can experience the true character of mizunara only after around 2 decades of maturation. This is something no one could have known back during the war, as whiskies weren't aged for more than a few years. It makes sense. So when you use tinker with Japanese mizunara oak barrels, it requires like 2 decades of maturation. Mizunara today just like a Japanese whiskey, previously ignored and now loved and sought after globally, Mizunara oak is extremely well regarded, seen as luxurious and superior. It is one of the rarest and most expensive types of oak in the world. Suntory is one of the main promoters of Mizunara, as the use of the oak became the norm for many of their most luxurious blends and single malt releases. Other Japanese producers, large and small, work with Japanese oak as much as they can, as it's hard to source, and some distilleries overseas have also tried their hand at maturation with the oak. Unfortunately, some companies use Mizunara because of the high quality image the name brings to a product and not because of the flavors, as the longest maturation period of these products is about 3 years. Hmm. As the longest maturation period of these products is about 3 years, which is far too short to allow the notes of Japanese oak to be detected. I agree, only 3 years. This, they want a fast bucks. Allow the notes of Japanese oak to be detected, allows the notes of the Japanese oak to be detected. The flavors you should be looking for from Mizunara are sandalwood, coconut, and a type of oriental incense named kara. You should also expect Japanese oak aged releases to cost a bit more, as Mizunara Punchan costs around $5,000 and is extremely difficult to source even in Japan. Mizunara Punchan, I think Punchan is barrel, maybe. Japanese aged oak aged. So sandalwood, coconut, and a type of oriental incense named kara. The wonderful Yamazaki 18-year-old has been partially aged in Japanese oak. The wonderful Yamazaki Mizunara series, however, will give you one of the more direct and eye-opening experiences with Japanese oak you can find. Well, this is a rather short article. I expect it to be a longer, lengthy one, But from this article, we know that if the notes of Japanese oak can be detected as a sandalwood woodiness, right? Sandalwood, coconut, and incense, Asian incense called kara, right? So coconut, sandalwood, woodiness, too much woodiness, and it requires 20 years of maturation. But many whiskey companies, they just age the Japanese mizunara whiskey in the mizunara oak for only 3 years. That's rather short. So punchan. What is punchan, man? Sounds like a barrel. Only $5,000, man. That's quite expensive. Punchan. Yeah. Punchan. Punchon. No internet. Yeah. Sorry about that. Clear. I'll go back. Punchan. Type in punchan. Punchan in American English. Punchan. A large cask of varying capacity, but usually 80 gallons or 304 liters. 80 gallons. So 1 gallon is like 3.6 liters. Yeah, like a 3.7 liters. Yeah, 3.7 liters. Punchan definition. Let's go to punchan. Punchan, dictionary.com. Yeah, punchan. Okay. What's the difference between barrel and cask? They're the same. Okay. Barrel is cask. Got it. So this article was written by George Koutsakis. As a half-Greek Scotsman, George discovered his passion for whiskey while working for Whisky, Japan's largest whiskey importer in Tokyo. George is now an integral part of the team at Takanta, acting as a head writer. He also writes for Forbes.com, Playboy, Financial Times, Food and Wine, Liquor.com, Wine Enthusiast, Savor, and Distiller.com, specializing in world whiskey and spirits. When he isn't sampling and writing about great spirits, he's drinking coffee, eating, and traveling the world. Follow his whiskey adventures on Instagram, Whiskey Islander. So from this article, I learned many things. So for the words punchan, barrels, casks, mizunara or acorn oak trees, porous, holes, hollow. Yeah, where's the part where the ungi? Sandalwood, coconut, the ancient incense of kara. the Pacific War. The Japanese army enjoyed whiskey during the war, World War II. The mizunara work was used in construction of expensive furniture. Coopers, right? Coopers. I didn't know Coopers were the makers of the barrels. Coopers. Flavors, notes. Yep, that's it. Thanks to thekanta.com, and I enjoyed your article, George Kutsakis. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.